Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Afterlife Podcast. This is your host, Pooja Chilakuri. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Barbara Bartolome. Barbara is a near-death experiencer, not once, but twice. The first one was in 1958, and the second one was in 1987. Assimilating these experiences into her life led her to develop strong connections with the International Association of Near-Death Studies, also known as IANDS, and the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. She founded the IANDS Santa Barbara group in 2011, and it has now grown into the largest West Coast IANDS group. Barbara previously held the U.S. Department of Defense secret clearance. She was also named Businesswoman of the Year in 2004 for Santa Barbara and was honored at the University of California for her volunteer work in the community. Welcome to the show, Barbara. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience with us today.
Thank you so much, Pooja. I'm so excited to be here, and you are such a delight to talk with. I am looking forward to having your friendship forever.
Thank you. Thank you. This means so much to me, Barbara. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your near-death experiences. So without further ado, please share what you experienced outside
Okay.
of your body.
Well, I'll give a little background that I was raised in Oregon, in Salem, Oregon, and I moved to Santa Barbara when I was about 27 years old. And up in Salem, I had married someone who um, was a friend in high school but didn't know very well. And I had a little son. And unfortunately, he didn't feel like he wanted to work in his life. He just kind of wanted to play. And I had bought a home when I was 21 years old. I worked for the telephone company in Oregon and had a great job. And I was on my way, but he was kind of like, I just want to play and have a fun time. So we ended up divorcing, and I had custody of our son. And I was working at the telephone company when I met a person that was in charge of a big um, building that was being done in the beach in Oregon. And I was assigned to that contract with the telephone company to have all the telephone lines and systems put in. So I ended up getting to know the general contractor that was building this big project. And he took a liking to me and he started pursuing me. And I ended up, after dating him for a while, he was moving back to Santa Barbara, California. And he asked me to move, and I said I would do that. And he ended up asking me to marry him. So we got married, and I thought this was going to be a good life. And I loved Santa Barbara, and I thought it was going to be great. I worked again where that secret clearance was given to me by the Department of Defense. And so I had a great job down here. And pretty soon after the marriage, he started acting. Uh, he had gone back into a position where he was an engineering supervisor for a company, and there was a lot of stress. And he started taking the stress out in ways of being angry at home. And he began hurting me and sometimes hurting my son. And I had never been in a situation like that before, so I didn't really know what to do. And I was in a new area, 1,000 miles away from all my support system up in Oregon. And I tried everything from writing him letters saying, I don't want to be hurt again. Don't touch me and hit me when you're mad. Walk out of the house. I just tried to do everything I could to get him to not hurt me. I invited him to go to a marriage family therapist, and he rejected that after about 2 or 3 sessions. I contacted a pastor of a church that I attended here in Santa Barbara for a period of time, and he wouldn't go to that session either, and it was just continued. So I ended up leaving him for a year and telling him, when you get counseling and correct your situation, then I would consider coming back again. And so I was gone for a year. He begged me to come back, saying he'd got the counseling, and of course he hadn't. He lied to me. And so I moved back in, and he began doing the same stuff over again. So um, he ended up hurting my back really badly. He ruptured a disc in my lower back on my L5S1. And the initial doctor that saw me told me that I would never walk again. I was 31 years old when that happened, and I had just had a baby with him. and it was a little girl, and she was about a month old when the back was injured. Um, about 5 months, when she was about 5 months old, so in December of 1987, the doctors wanted to do a myelogram and a surgery that would be a laminectomy discectomy on my L5S1 area, cleaning out the fragments of the disc. And the myelogram, which is where I had my near death experience, was done the night before the actual surgery on my back. And they wanted to check to see if the spinal cord had been chipped and there was spinal fluid leaking from my spinal cord because I couldn't walk anymore. They were concerned that the surgery, if they cleaned up the discs and stuff and left the spinal cord leaking, wouldn't be successful. So they did this myelogram and they inject iodine dye into the back of your neck, right behind, right back here. And they numbed the area, just a local. And they had me on an x ray table and they told me, you have to hold very, very still because if you move at all during this procedure, you're going to have headaches for months afterwards. Hold very still. So I'm laying on the table, and the guy who's the x-ray tech that's going to press the button on the table to tip the table where my head goes up and my feet are down, starts pressing the button, and he immediately turns to the other x-ray tech who's got the monitor in front of him at the head of the table, and he's going to be watching the dye go down my spine, and he starts talking about his weekend plans. So they're not watching me at all. The two doctors, the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon that are going to do the surgery the next day, are standing behind the guy who's got his finger on the button, leaning against a wall, talking to each other. And the nurse that's in the room is over at a desk by the door doing something. So no one's really watching the table, and what he was doing was pushing the wrong button, and he was lowering my head instead of raising it. But the table was moving so slowly, I couldn't tell what was going on. I couldn't tell it was lowering. But the dye was immediately going from the back of my neck right into my brain. And I felt really funny immediately within 15 seconds or so. I was like, whoa, what's going on? But everybody's talking to each other, and I'm not going to interrupt anybody. And I'm laying there being a good girl. And after about maybe a minute, minute and a half, I'm not sure how long it was, I realized, you know what? I feel so weird that I have got to say something. And so when I tried to talk, I couldn't actually speak. I could still think fine, but I couldn't speak. And I couldn't reach my hand out to touch them. So the dye had already started messing up the processes inside my brain. And so then I started hyperventilating, and my eyes were rolling to the back of my head. And the guy who was pushing the button on the table noticed that, the hyperventilation, and they both stopped talking and looked at me. And he leaned over my face on the table, and he saw my eyes were rolling to the back of my head. And he leaned back. The last thing I saw before I died was he leaned back and looked where his thumb was on the side of the table and made this look on his face like he knew that he had just pushed the wrong button. Uh-oh. So that's the last thing I saw. The next second, I was up on the ceiling, and it felt like the ceiling was against the back of my head. So it felt like I had a head up there, but I didn't. I was just who I was. My consciousness was up there. And I was looking straight down at my body and all the tops of their heads. And he started calling code blue. And I looked down at everything and said, huh. I was very calm up there where I'd felt very panicked in my body. And I felt very calm up there. And I said, huh, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. And right when I said that, I felt this presence that was right here to the left of my head. It just felt like this amazing, eternal, felt like God, what I would think God would feel like. It felt like God was next to me. And I began communicating to God how much I wanted to go back into my life. And I said that I wanted to protect my children, that if I was gone, if I left, then my children wouldn't grow up to be the good human beings they're capable of being because of the abuse that they would encounter with the father. So I was saying that multiple times up there. Down below, it was a psychotic mess. They were yelling at each other. They were screaming for oxygen cart. The lady that was at the desk was calling for a defib unit and saying stat. And the oxygen cart came in, And the two x-ray techs had been doing CPR on me. So one had been doing chest compressions and one had been blowing in my mouth. But when the oxygen cart came in, they put the oxygen mask on my face. And then the two x-ray techs just switched every 2 minutes, and they were doing the chest compressions for 2 minutes. Then the other guy would come over and he would do the chest compressions for 2 minutes. And they were waiting for the defib unit. But unfortunately, it didn't come in. So after, I don't know how much time, I'm going to say 8 to 10 minutes, the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. So the orthopedic surgeon said, stand clear. And he took 2 steps forward, put his arm behind his back, and struck my chest. I never had known anything like that could be done because I don't watch TV and not in the medical field. And it's called a precardial thump, I found out later. And it's done on last ditch effort to try to restart someone's heart when they can't get a defib unit in there. And it's very rarely works. So he struck me the first time. I watched my body jerk from the strike, and up above on the ceiling, I had been saying, how much I wanted to go back into my life to protect my children. The being finally spoke to me. And in this beautiful voice that literally I could never imitate, it said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then I was shown all these film clips that just went flash, 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 flash. And it was all these incidents that I had been hit, kicked, pushed, shoved, all the destruction that my now ex-husband was doing in my life was shown to me. And then I was given time to think about what I wanted to do. And I thought about all the things that I had done to try to help him change. We'd been married like 7 years by that time. And I then realized it's not him that needs to change. It's me. He's not going to change. I need to make a different decision for my life. So I said, if you let me go back, I promise you I'll get strong enough to leave him. And the second I said him, the doctor did the second precardial thump and it restarted my heart. And I literally shut my eyes up on the ceiling and opened my eyes, and I had the oxygen mask on my face and I was back in my body. And I talked to the oxygen mask. He was, only a fist length away from me. And I said, what just happened, into the oxygen mask? And the nurse leaned over me and said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. And so for 20 minutes, I had the oxygen mask on and I was like watching everybody and like, what was that? I was up on the ceiling, And so then I'd never heard of a near-death experience. I'd never, meditated. I wasn't in that area of life at all. So I was like, what was that? And so when they took the oxygen mask off, I said, the neurosurgeon was standing right next to the table. So was the orthopedic surgeon, and all the rest of the people were still in the room. And I said, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon went, oh, brother. And so that at age 31, having just had that happen, made me completely tell exactly what each person had said and done during the time that I was dead, which freaked the neurosurgeon out. And he clenched his fist up and he went, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out of the room. And then the orthopedic surgeon took my hand and I was still on the table and he was saying, can you tell me again, what did you see and what did you hear? And so he validated it again in front of everybody. And how did you feel? And then when we finally got to the end of me talking about it and him asking questions, they put me on a gurney, sent me up to a room because I was having the surgery the next morning. And not a single person at the hospital from that point on would answer any questions at all for me when I would say, what happened during my myelogram? What was that? I was up on the ceiling. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I don't see anything here in your records. And the next day they did the surgery. And when both the doctors came into the recovery area, and as they were approaching me, I said, what happened last night? And the neurosurgeon put his hand out like this and he said, I am not here to talk about what happened during your myelogram. I'm here to talk about what happened during your surgery. And so he completely closed me down. So when my now ex-husband came later that afternoon after the surgery, and I told him what had happened. He, being an engineer, he said, "That couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated that." Well, I've never done drugs. I don't even drink alcohol. I like tried it like 2 times in my life. My mom was a police officer. She would always routinely say that she would shoot my rear off if I did anything like that. So when I was like young in my teens, and so I didn't want to do drugs. I didn't want to do alcohol. I don't yeah, just like no. So why would I be doing that? So that shut me down more, and I didn't talk about it for about 12 years.
Wow.
I ended up talking to a nurse who works at the hospital here in Santa Barbara, who was a friend of mine, and she ended up telling me that it was called a near-death experience and that there was a lot of information. The internet had come up by then, so I was able to look online and find the IONS organization as well as the NDERF, which is Near Death Experience Research Foundation.
Mhm.
And that's the one that I found first. And the doctor who's in charge of that is Dr. Jeffrey Long. And he was the one who introduced me to the IONS organization at a conference that I attended in 2009. And so that's been a long family feeling of knowing everyone in the IONS organization and all the NDEers. And then I started my group in 2011 here in Santa Barbara. Now, one of the interesting things that happened was when I was about 55 years old, I hadn't by that time told anybody about my near death experience except for I got remarried and I told my current husband, and he's super supportive. And so I really was still under the covers and not telling anybody. I hadn't told my family. And I was at one of the IONS conferences, and PMH Atwater, who's written a number of books,
Uh-huh.
including the Big Book of Near Death Experiences and the Idiot's Book of Near Death Experience, or something like that. Anyway, a bunch of books. And she was talking about the after effects that happen to near death experiencers. And I was in her talk and I was listening with the rest of the audience. But it was so bizarre because the things that she was saying, I knew that I had had them before my near death experience. So I was identifying with them prior to the NDE in 1987. So after her talk, I went up to talk to her and I said, I just don't understand. I've had what you're saying, these after effects are all the way back to my childhood.
Mhm.
And she said, she took my hand, she was very tender, and she took my hands and she said, "My dear, I think you ought to talk with your family because there may be something that wasn't told to you. Maybe during birth something happened, or maybe in your childhood something happened." And she said, Ask your family about it." So I at the time thought, come on, really? You think I've had more than one of these? And I just couldn't believe that that was what she was implying. But I was going up to see my older brother, who's 10 years older than me, up in Salem, Oregon, about a month after that conference. And so I sat there and thought, without telling him that I've had a near-death experience, how am I going to get him to tell me anything about medical things that might have happened to me when I was young? And then I thought, oh, I can tell him that I'm putting together a little booklet that I'm going to keep in my purse of all my medical background, all my vaccinations, my time that I broke my arm, the different things that have happened in my life, babies, births, things like that. And I'll say that I want to check with him since he's the oldest brother of anything that happened when I was young. Does he remember anything that I should add? So I did that at a dinner that we were having with him and his wife. And when we were going into the restaurant, he said, "Well, I'll think about it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head." And so we walked in, we had dinner, we were having a great time, and we came outside the restaurant. And my husband was sitting next to me, and my brother put his hand on my arm. I'll never forget this. And he said, "Barb, there is something I need to tell you." And I went, "What?" And he said, "You died when you were 18 months old." And I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You had a high fever from, I don't know if it was flu or measles or chicken pox. I don't know what the situation was that you had this like over 104-degree fever." He said, "You were just, 18 months old. Mom was pregnant with our last child, my little sister." And he said that dad called over to the fire department, which would be like 911 back then. It would have been about 1958 when this happened. And he said that he was my brother said that my dad was told to have my mom put my body in tepid bath water and then slowly add ice cubes. Well, we only had one tray of ice cubes. So my mom sent both of my older brothers over to the neighbors' houses to get more ice. And my oldest brother came back first with a bag of ice, and he handed it to my mom, and she was sobbing over the top of my body. And he said I had turned purple, soft purple. And he said, you weren't breathing. There was no life in you, Barb. And he said he watched from the doorway. He would have been about 12 years old when this happened. And he watched from the doorway, and he said mom started adding the ice slowly into the water to change the temperature, cool it down a bit. And he said all of a sudden you came back to life. And he said you took in a deep breath and you went, and you arched your back, and then you went, wah, wah, wah. And he said, and he said, you turned bright red again from the fever. And he said, I was never so happy to see my little baby sister cry. And so he said that the ambulance people came in a couple minutes later, and they wrapped me up in a blanket and they took me off in the ambulance. And as my parents were leaving to drive to the hospital, my older sister came running up the stairs and said, why was Barbie having a temper tantrum? And my mom looked at her and said, why would you say that? And she said, well, the babysitter that's helping, was a person that my mom hired to help with all four of the kids while she was ready to have the baby, said that I was having a temper tantrum, and that, that Barbie was having a temper tantrum, and then I couldn't go upstairs. So my mom ended up firing that woman, and that's why my sister remembers the incident, because they never saw her again. And so that was a really big deal for me to hear that had happened, because it completely justified a lot of things that had happened in my life that I always thought, why does this stuff happen to me, where I had amazing impacts of intuition and things that had occurred in my childhood as well as all my teen years. And it used to freak people out. So I was really happy to figure it out, that it was due to my near-death experience, that's where the gift was coming from. So I've had a lot of wonderful experiences. I think I'm going to be writing a book called The Amazing Life of a Double Dead Redhead, but I'm only in chapter 3 so far, so you'll have to hold off for a while before you
I'm
get it.
gonna hold off, but when you write your book, you have to let me know.
I'll send you one.
You have to let me know, Barbara.
I will.
I'm listening to you, and my heart is so full right now. I don't know if you noticed, I was trying to make notes, but there's so much in your experience that I want to unpack. I don't even know where to begin. So I'm going to begin with, that you were able to see things, hear things, feel things without a body.
Yeah. Yep. Your consciousness survives death. When you die, it's just shedding your body. It is amazing, because you're exactly the same who you are. Your consciousness is, away from your body, whether you're going down a tunnel, which 20% of near-death experiencers have this experience where they go further and they go down the tunnel, they see deceased loved ones, or they see a religious figure that's important in their life. And, those stories are 20% of the near-death experiencers. 80% of us do what I do, which is rise above our body in a car accident or in a medical procedure or something else, and watch a situation and then go back into our body again. So it's pretty amazing. I had a beautiful out of the body and then back into the body experience during my NDE, but I'm looking forward to the next one where I get to go all the way home again.
Oh, Barbara. You're saying that you were outside and then you were inside, and only to be told by everyone around you, right, that it's hallucination. And, I want to ask them how a hallucination is so accurate in its details,
I
right?
know, I know, really. Luckily the medical people didn't say it was a hallucination. It was just, my now ex-husband called it that. But the medical people denied it because there was liability involved. That
Yes.
wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to die on that x-ray table. So they were not speaking to me because of legal liabilities. But yeah, it's really interesting how many people will deny something like this when they haven't had one, and they don't know anything about it. They
And
just,
this is the
all of
part.
these stories are beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, and this is the part that I think becomes a huge challenge for people when they have an experience
Mhm.
to, find people to share with. So I really appreciate what you're doing with the IANS group, helping people to integrate these experiences. Barbara, something in your story that really touched me very personally, and I think it's going to help a lot of women that are maybe in some fundamentalist type cults or religious groups where you meet this being, this very kind, I want to say merciful and kind being, and we'll say God, and you have permission to leave an abusive situation. Whereas, I know from past experiences that some women in fundamentalist type situations, they're told you have to submit to that. And yet, what you experienced on the other side, it's like straight from the horse's mouth.
Exactly.
So, thank
He
you.
wanted
Thank
me to
you.
know that I was, did I truly want to go back into that abusive situation, or did I want to stay with him where I was safe? But
Yeah.
it was my children that I loved so much. That was what pulled me back into the situation. And I
Mhm.
realized that I had a choice. I could choose to leave. And
Mhm.
once I said that, if you let me go back, I promise you, I'll get strong enough to leave him. Then he put me back into my body. I knew
Mhm.
I had made a promise and I was going to carry that out no matter how long it took me to get
Mhm.
away. I knew I'd made a promise to God to do that. And so then it took me 3 years of putting up with all of the abuse and trying to do everything perfectly so that my husband wouldn't fly off the handle. And finally, it was an amazing moment when he told me he had to go to Montreal, Quebec, Canada for a business trip. And I realized there was my opening. And
Mhm.
I took him to the airport, kissed him goodbye as if everything was normal. And when he came back a week later, I had moved out of the house with just my own belongings and my children's belongings. I
Mhm.
left everything else so that he would not be mad. And I also filed a restraining order with a legal person so that he
Mhm.
could not come over and hurt me. If he
Mhm.
did, the police would respond immediately because there was a
Mhm.
restraining order.
Mhm.
So I can't tell you the difference in my life between having someone who I'm scared constantly that I'm going to do something wrong and I'm scared constantly I'm going to get
Mhm.
hurt versus the kind person that I'm married to now who would never raise his hand or his anger or his words to do anything mean to me or my children or his children. We both had 2 children when we got married, and then we had a child together. We have 5 children. Plus, we have 16 foreign exchange students that we've hosted, and I am married to the most wonderful guy in the world. And so that would have never happened. I would have been trapped in that bad situation. I really feel that God planted the NDE and planted the situation in my life to get
Mhm.
me out of the situation that I was in
Mhm.
at the time that it was planted. I see that if that had not happened, I wouldn't have left because I was so scared of him.
Mhm.
I was afraid constantly. Even when I left for that 1 year, I was watching over my shoulder constantly.
Mhm.
I thought he was going to come and kill me. I was really, really scared. So I
Thank you
really
for
want people to
sharing.
know they have an option.
Yeah.
They can choose to leave and they should choose to leave,
Mhm.
but leave in a safe way. Leave in a
Yes,
safe way.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Barbara. I know that, sometimes it gives permission. It's like very liberating to hear someone
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
experience and overcome it.
God
So,
doesn't want you to live in that situation. He does
mm-mm,
not want you to live in that
mm-mm,
situation.
not
He
at
does
all.
not. He loves you so much.
Yeah,
And he loves the person who's doing the abusive stuff
yeah,
too. But,
yeah.
that doesn't mean you have to, go live with the abusive stuff. You can find instead a way out and then find, like I did, someone who isn't that type of person. You know how I did it? I always tell young people all the time how I found my husband I'm married to now. I took a little notebook and I put it next to my bed and I listed all the character traits that I would want in someone if I was ever going to date again. I wanted to have these character traits: honesty, patience, kindness, all the different good things. And I only put good ones down. And after I kind of ran out of them, couldn't think of any more, I started watching people around me and I would watch for character traits, or I would think of people I've known and think of their positive character traits and I would add them to the list. So 2 years. I would do it, most nights I would do it. And after I would shut the book before I would go to sleep, I would send up a little prayer and I would say, God, I don't know who this person is, but I know that you do. And if you could bring him to me in a safe way so that I can evaluate that this is the person that I've been writing about, I would really appreciate it. And if you could do that in the timing that would be right for his life as well as my life, I would appreciate that too.
Mhm.
And I thank you so much. Good night. And 2 years later, my son walked in on a Saturday into our apartment and he had a girl, he was in 8th grade and she was in 7th grade, had a girl with him. And they weren't, like they wouldn't like each other. It was just they were friends. And they had met in the neighborhood. They went to junior high together and they wanted to go to a movie. So I said that I would go. And they said, come over and pick us up over at her house. She lives right around the corner. So when I did that and I knocked on the front door, a 7-foot tall guy opened the front door, and he is now my husband because the children were putting us together, which is God's way of doing it in a safe way. And I was able over the next 4 months to look at my list and look at this guy's behaviors and see it was exactly what I'd been writing about.
Yeah.
All the positive things were all there in this guy. And now we have actually been married 30 years.
Wow.
Positive, happy 30 years. Instead
That's
of me running through all that negativity with that ex-husband and the abuse and possible future death with him, I left him. God wanted me to do that. And I found the right person instead. And everyone out there needs to try to do the same thing because there's no reason to stay in the abuse. There is no reason.
yes. None at all.
No.
And it was like a gift from your NDE, right?
Yeah. Oh, I count it as a huge gift from God that the
Mhm.
NDE occurred because I'm
Mhm.
not sure if I would have been able to figure out that I needed was me that needed to change. I was always trying to change
Mhm.
him and get him to clean up his act, but that
No.
was never going to happen. So I'd lost a lot of my personal power by his abuse, which is
Mhm.
very common in abusive situations. And I needed to regain that and get out on my own and stand up and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. Yeah. In a
That's
safe way though, so that he didn't have the chance to
chance
hurt.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. And speaking of gifts, I have heard, and I know we were talking earlier too, that when you come back into your body, you're not the same, right?
Right.
There's things that change. So do you experience some of those changes?
All the time. All the time. One of the biggest ones, they've done a lot of research at the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. They've done a lot of research on the after effects that near death experiencers have, and there are many. And one of the biggest ones is an increased intuition. Now, you can call intuition, your own feelings of figuring out something that's going to happen, or, you know, it's not you. It's the other side is able to tell you something and then you get this, oh, that's going to happen moment because they're helping. So what ended up happening for me was a very big one that just blew my current husband's mind. We were driving back from me doing 5 talks up in San Francisco, and it was about 9:30 at night, and we were about 30 miles north of Santa Barbara where we live. And the freeway, 101 freeway, comes from inland and it hits the ocean and it curves and it comes down along the ocean, and there's no street lights. It's beautiful at night, the stars and the moon. And I had my seat laying back, and my husband was driving, and I was looking out the window at the moon and the stars, and it was just, ready to get home. I'd been gone for 6 or so days, and I was just like really wanted to go home. So all of a sudden, as we came around the corner that where it runs towards Santa Barbara and it comes along the ocean, that's known in that area for big, big winds. And so the winds were blowing and it was, kind of blustery. And all of a sudden, this big gust of wind hit the side of the van. And I watched as my husband was holding onto the steering wheel and his hands were shaking and he was trying to keep the car under control. And we have a Toyota van. And so I watched as that happened, and, I was like, "Oh gosh." And then the gust slowed down and I said, "Victor, I don't think we should do 65 miles an hour. I think we should slow down to do 50. This is pretty dangerous with this wind." And he said, yeah, I think so too. So he slowed down to 50. And so we're going along and I'm thinking we're okay. And I'm looking out the window still. And, I think we're safe now. It's still blustery, but it's not bad. And all of a sudden in my right ear, I hear danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I'm like, uh, so I sat up in my seat and I had my seatbelt and made sure it was tight across my chest. And I turned to Victor and I said, do you know how I hear from the other side, Victor? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And so I said, something very dangerous is up ahead, but I don't know what it is. It could be a tree that's blown down. It could be a car that's stalled. I don't know what it is, but we need to slow down because we don't want to hit it. So let's do 30 miles an hour. And he goes, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30. And so then I turned around and I looked through the back of our van and I looked out the front and I said, there are no other cars around us. There are two lanes going down into Santa Barbara and they're separate from the two lanes going away from Santa Barbara. And so there's two lanes and there's nobody ahead of us or behind us. And no lights at all. And I'm like, I think we can do 30. I don't think anybody's going to care whether we're doing 30. So he goes, okay, all right, we can do 30. So we're going along at 30 miles an hour. And we'd come around this corner, and way up in the distance in the dark is a single police car's lights. And I can, immediately know that that's where the danger is. So I was looking through the windshield trying to see, why is the police car up there? He's, you know, out of the distance where I can actually, we're not right behind him or anything. And as we're coming along in the slow lane, the first thing that I noticed is that, okay, he's in the slow lane, parked, stopped in the slow lane. So he's not off the freeway pulling someone over. He's blocking the slow lane. So as Victor comes up behind, he starts to change lanes and go over to the fast lane. And whoever it was that was warning me from the other side I literally felt a hands grab my upper arms right here. And I saw a face shimmer in front of my face. And I heard, 10 miles an hour. And I was so freaked out that they were touching me and I saw the shimmer and the 10 miles an hour that I squealed 10 miles an hour to Victor. And he slowed down from 30 to 10. He was now in the fast lane and he got level with the police car. We were doing 10 miles an hour. And just as we went past the police car, 20, 30 yards, I'm not sure my measurements, all of a sudden our lights then finally lit up what was in front of us, and it was a big semi truck that had turned over on its side. And this is a picture from the newspaper,
Oh
and
my
it
goodness.
was blocking the cab of the truck, which is this one right here, was blocking the fast lane, and the rest of the truck was blocking the slow lane and off the side of the freeway. And we were headed right for the bottom of the cab of the truck, which is where the gas tanks are. So because we were only doing 10 miles an hour, my husband was able to maneuver off the left-hand side of the road, go
Mm.
around the front of the truck. And then when I looked up at the top of the truck, when we were on the far side of it, the police officer was standing up on top of it, talking to the truck driver, and didn't realize that we were coming because the wind was making so much noise. And he looked with a shocked face down at the van. And my husband continued to drive and started going down the freeway towards Santa Barbara. And I started thanking the other side and said,
Mhm.
thank you so much for that. Thank you for the truck driver's life, police officer's life, my husband's life. I'm here in my life to serve you, and I am here to do good work. And if you want me to stay, I'll stay and do good work. And if you want me to come home whenever you're ready, I'm ready too. So I was saying that my husband finally, about 10 minutes into the, drive past the situation, he goes, Barbara, how is it that you were able to do that? And I said, Victor, it wasn't me that did that. It was the other side that
Mhm.
made that change in the situation, told us what we needed to know to get out of that situation. And I said, if everybody just understood that they have that help, and if they keep that door open to the other side, whether it be through prayers or whether it just be through walking along the street saying, look at that beautiful car. Isn't that pretty?
Mhm.
Or look at that tree. Oh, look at there's a little baby. Isn't that little baby cute? You're just
Mhm.
talking to the other side, whether it be your deceased loved ones, whether it be angels, whether it be God, whether, just keeping that connection open and saying, I believe you're there, lets them know that they can talk with you and they can, end up helping you in situations that you need it. I've always said to them, I don't want to be a medium. I don't want to serve in that capacity, but I'm very grateful for when you come through and help me with things. And so that was one of the biggest ones they helped me with right there.
Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. We were talking earlier about this too. Sometimes I think that the whole planet is in so much turmoil. And that is one of the reasons I am so obsessed with these stories, such as yours, because I feel like that kind of opens a door to be connected to the other side where we are receiving all the help and all the healing.
Yes,
So
absolutely. If we have that door open to receiving that help and healing,
yes.
sometimes when we've chosen the different things that we wanted to have happen in our life, maybe recovering from cancer isn't a possibility because we chose that we were going to have that cancer. So we
Mhm,
would learn from that situation and grow our soul for the next round when we come back again. But sometimes those miracles are capable of being done, and we should never rule them out. We should always believe that those miracles can happen and that, you
mhm,
know, just talking to the other side and just having that open door is just so beautiful to have the input. One
mhm,
of the things that's happened in my life is that after my husband, my tall 7-foot husband, and I got married, we ended up having about a year and a half later a little 11-pound baby. And you can imagine that I was a little on the shocked side in the 6th month when I got the message from the other side that I was going to have an 11-pound baby. So I told the doctor on 3 different visits that I was, worried about the size of the baby since I'm 5'9" and my sister is 6'3" and we're from a tall family. And then my husband is, 7 feet tall and his dad's 6'3" and he's tall. And I said, I really would like to check to see if this baby's going to be really big because we're going to have to do a different birth if
mhm,
we have this monster baby. And the doctor completely ignored everything that I said. And the baby was born, and the doctor almost he turned around after he'd screamed down the hallway asking for assistance. He turned around and told my husband, the nurse, and I that he was going to have to break my baby's shoulders to get the baby out of the birth canal. So he didn't listen whatsoever. So it's really important that you find people around you that are
mhm,
going to listen to you, that are going to
mhm.
you need to listen, as well as the people around you need to be supportive of you. And you need to figure out that the other side has the capacity to assist if you keep that door open and you ask them to help. I talk to them all the time and say, you know what, I'm here for you. I'm
Mhm,
here. If you put somebody in front of me and I have the resources to help that person, you know that I will. That's why I got that award out at the university for all the volunteer work I did.
mhm,
um, and I have to say that there's just so much that can be done with the help of them. You are such a much more capable person with their assistance than you are on your own. So open that door and let them, give you the guidance that you need to be able to be your best self, and also do the good things that you want to see in your life at the end of your life. When you look at your life, when you've touched this person here and they've turned around and touched that person and that person and that person and spreads out all good, that's what you're going to end up seeing. And
mhm,
if you've been bad and you've done these bad things, this, that, and that, and doing this, then you're going to see how that transferred out too.
mhm,
So find ways to be a good person in the world, and even just in a little group around you. When you're going at the grocery store, I smile at little babies in shopping carts and go, and make little faces, and and they always laugh, and the moms start talking to me, and we make friends. I make friends everywhere I go just by being fun and happy, and being kind. And sometimes, there's just a wonderful moment where somebody is ahead of you in the shopping cart line and they've got just a few things, and they all of a sudden realize that they don't have any money in their purse or something, and you pay the $8 or $20 or whatever it is for their groceries.
yeah.
What a wonderful moment that you got to to give something positive to the world and that person, and that will be given back to you. So, do those kind things, do the fun stuff, do the good things, and keep your life, focused on positives, because that's where we all need to be.
And you definitely exude that, Barbara. I
Thanks.
got that even from just your email communication. So, yes, and thank you for reminding us how easy it is. You
It is, if you
know,
choose to, yeah. And I
it,
think that skips over the depression side of life, because a lot of people will contact me and say that they're suffering from depression, and what should I do?
Mhm,
Well, to stop focusing on yourself.
mhm,
Instead, focus on how you can be positive to others.
mhm.
That completely erases any depression you could possibly feel. And one of the things I was going to tell you is that my 7 foot tall husband, after we had that baby, we found out that he had cancer, and he had a very, very rare type of lymphoma. And we went through 5.5 years of chemo, multiple rounds of radiation. We kept a positive outlook the whole time. I took chocolate to everybody at the cancer center and would, take these Lindt chocolate balls and pass them out to everybody and be positive. And it turned out that Stanford University ended up doing a clinical study with my husband, one of 18 people worldwide, and they did a stem cell transplant that eradicated his cancer in 14 days. The miracle occurred 30 years after we discovered he had cancer. He now currently is being helped by Stanford University, and they're watching him very closely, and they're going to keep as closest tabs as they can on him and keep his cancer at bay. So, you know, don't give up hope. The other side wants to help you and do all those good things, and miracles do occur.
Yes, they do.
They
And I
do.
think, I-
I'm definitely seeing it.
yes, I think me being able to get you on the show is a miracle for me. Let me tell you, never dreamed ever, ever, ever that I would be doing this one day and I would get to talk to you.
Well, what you're doing is spreading the word, and what every end of year, the reason why we come out of the closet and talk about our near death experience, because it puts you in a weird position. I was, had a business in Santa Barbara, and I'd been named Businesswoman of the Year. And then all of a sudden, I decide to start talking about near death experiences. And, that's kind of scary for your career. But what it is it's a blessing for so many people that hear the experience and can apply it to their life, the things that I've been saying, and absorb what I'm telling them and what all the other NDEers are telling them. And, we're all trying to give the gift of our NDE out to help the world be a better place. That's all we really want. We want all of the negative stuff that's out there, the everything that's there that brings you down and causes depression. you know just keep being a light in this world. Everyone needs to keep their light lit and not go into the depression mode and pull the covers over their head and not go out there and do good things, because when we all do that, we've lost. But
Mhm,
when we win is when we go out there and we do something. Maybe I can't stop the war in Ukraine. Maybe I can't do anything about who's politically active and who's going to be president next, or I can't do anything about that other than vote. But what I can do is try to help those people around me, individuals that are in my neighborhood, in my community, and people that interact with me, to have a better feeling about life. And the people that hear the NDE stories hopefully gain from each story that they listen to. So I hope that they will listen to as many as they can. I tape record, audio tape my speakers, and I put them on soundcloud.com, and it doesn't cost anything at all to listen to those audio
mhm.
tapes. And they're all you have to do on the search bar on SoundCloud is put in IANDS Santa Barbara. And that'll go right into our folder that has, I don't know, 40, 50 tapes of speakers that have come to Santa Barbara and have talked. And I've had everybody from Raymond Moody, who wrote the book Life After Life, to Dr. Eben Alexander from Harvard University, to Anita Morjani, and all sorts of good people everywhere from everywhere. Who doesn't want to come to Santa Barbara to talk? So I have a great spot here and I have a great group, and I love giving those messages out and making it free for anyone to listen to. So I really hope this helps people, and I really hope this is a gift that will help people in their lives.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to include that link in the show
Ah,
notes so people
good.
can easily click on it. And I'm also, with your permission, going to include your email if they wanted to get in
Yeah,
touch with you.
yeah, that'd be
Yes.
fine.
Yeah. And
That sounds good.
I really, really appreciate you today for
Oh,
sharing.
thank you,
Thank you
Pooja.
so
I
much.
hope we get to hug at some future point because we're now best buddies,
Yes,
okay?
I hope so. And maybe, just maybe, I might make it to a conference where I get to see you.
The one in Arlington, Virginia is coming up, and the dates are, let's see,
Oh my God.
August 30th through September 3rd. And it's in Arlington, Virginia. And you can go to iands.org, IANDS.org, and look at the conference information. There are so many good speakers that are going to be at that conference. Plus, there's so many people like me who's not a speaker at the conference, but I attend, and you can get a chance to meet all of us.
Yes.
And it's just amazing. Everybody's very open and positive and friendly. So I think that, if
Yeah.
anybody is interested and wants to go, please sign up and go. There discounts that end on August 8th. I'm looking at another screen over here. The sign up discounts end on August 8th at 11:59 p.m. So Central Time. So be sure to
Yeah.
sign up to attend the conference before then so you can get the lower price.
Yeah. Thank
There
you,
you
Barbara.
go.
Thank
I'll
you.
see everybody there, and I expect hugs.
Yes, I will give you one if I get to go.
Good,
Thank
good, good,
you.
good. Well,
Mm,
I really enjoyed it, Pooja. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.